Well, hello, ladies and gents. Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, and I got an AMA episode for you today. This was brought to us by Josh, and he's got some questions on fueling for performance in the obstacle race realm. So, before we dive into that, though, let's roll the intro. All right, Josh asks, it's kind of a long one here, so bear with me. He says, Robert, I've been following a ketogenic lifestyle now for 1.5 years. I'm 5'6", 160 pounds, and last caliper measurements had him at 12% body fat. I'm eating high fats with a moderate protein diet, and carbs are as low as possible. Calorie intake is around 2,700, sometimes 3,500, but I haven't been tight on tracking anymore, seeing as I eat a lot of the same thing now over and over again. Now I'm one of the few athletes in my Spartan Canada series eating this way and competing. This type of sport is generally a high carb diet for athletes, and it's been tricky as there seems to be a lot of them wanting to see him fail on the course. So far, this hasn't happened, and I've been able to stay within the top 10 or 15% of finishers. Heading out for Father's Day weekend for my first 50K 60 obstacle race course with an average completion time of 13 hours, followed with a 10K 25 obstacle and a 5K 15 obstacle the following day in Mount Tremblant, Quebec, Canada. Would you have any advice to properly fuel the body for such a huge physically demanding request of it? I have some keto bricks on their way currently to melt down and help to snack on while running. I find it to be burning 1,200 calories per hour on the course. Thank you for everything, brother. Missing you on socials these days since I'm out of the Facebook and Instagram world. Great question, Josh. I can totally relate. A lot of people in the bodybuilding space wanted to see me fail once I stepped away from the carbohydrate-dependent diets. So when it comes to fueling for an event like that, I typically recommend doing a refeed the day prior to a strenuous activity. I do a refeed before I compete in a bodybuilding show, or that's what I have my powerlifting competitors do, things of that nature. With your sport, if it being like a 13-hour consistent strenuous activity like that, a single refeed day the day prior probably isn't going to be all that you would likely benefit from. So I would recommend loading the several days leading up to that event. So for instance, if you're taking in, let's see here, 2,700 calories some days, as high as 3,500 calories, what I would probably do is the 3 days before your event have 3,500 calories. That way you're about 1,000 calories over baseline for the 3 days leading up into that event. You can play around with your electrolytes a little bit, but honestly, I would pretty much keep your electrolytes the same until the night before. Maybe do a bolus dose of sodium and potassium the day prior, and then obviously increase sodium and potassium during the day of the event based off of amounts of perspiration and just excretion that you're doing. But I do recommend having a load of probably 3 days before the actual event of about 1,000 calories over. I started experimenting with that with my prep this past season, and I would basically accomplish that via keeping my calories at baseline, but then the evening, 3 nights before, I started having an additional pound of lamb, which is relatively higher in fats compared to like most, cuts of beef. So I have an extra 1,000 calories of lamb with duck fat. So a considerable increase in both fat and protein. And that seemed to work really, really well for me. My body accepted that extra nutrition, and it didn't result in any GI distress, which you definitely want to avoid on the trails and the obstacles. So try and stick with something that your body tolerates well and you've likely had time to experiment with. For me, that was an additional pound of lamb with some duck fat on top of that. And basically what's happening here is your body's able to store those lipids as energy in the fat droplets, the lipid droplets within your bloodstream, within your cells, and then your body's able to tap into that very effectively. I'm not a biochemist, don't plan to be one on the internet, so somebody else could explain that from a mechanistic standpoint much easier than me, but you're able to store those lipids in a pretty easily accessible way before it gets stored as actual body fat. It's going to be a time period there where you can tap into that readily because it's going to be stored as extra lipids that you can use as fuel, but not necessarily stored as adipose tissue in such a short time frame. So loading that fat and protein, probably starting about 3 days out from the event is what I would recommend doing personally. Experiment with it, try it and see what works. And then obviously the day of, be cognizant of your electrolyte intake, stay hydrated, have something like the bricks or some meat sticks or something like that on the trails as needed, and you should be honestly totally good to go. Best of luck, brother. Definitely keep us posted. Let us know how you do. And because you submitted this question and I used it, you requested some chocolate peanut butter cup bricks. So I've got some shipping out to you in Canada. Thank you so much for submitting the question. And if y'all don't know how this works, basically with these AMA questions, if you submit me a well thought out question via the link in the description below and I use your question, I will send you some free keto bricks with a flavor of your choosing. Thanks again, Josh. Talk to y'all next time.